Well, the time has just gone about 6:45, and a big welcome to everyone watching us around the world, watching us tonight on Zoom, on YouTube, and on Facebook. Danny Kadar, can you believe it's December again?
Howard, where did this year go by? But it's been a good year. It's been a good year. Definitely definitely a better year than last year, and a better December, hopefully.
So what the December plans? Because, of course, in South Africa, December is a big month.
Howard, I started a new job, so I'm cashed out. So I'm just chilling at work. I am cashed out on leave. The Chagim took it out of me, hey? But it's fine. We'll relax. We'll go to the gym in the middle of the day. We'll go sauna a little bit. We'll relax, close up some good deals, and it's fine. So sadly, not going away.
What is the last date that things happen in December from a work perspective? Like, can you get any deals done?
You actually can. People, in our world, definitely, because, well, actually it depends. If it's financial year end, then you've got no hope. But if it's not, it's actually a nice quiet time. So people actually like to kick off the new solution that we offer. It's they've got some downtime to do the training or whatever, and then they can, so we push quite hard to onboard people during December, actually, because January and February, it's chaotic in the financial world as well. So don't underestimate the power of December.
So I'm going to ask all of our people to turn on their cameras and come join us, and let's find out what's happening in everyone's worlds at the moment. And let's get a few of our Gen Zs on and talking to us. My goodness, one by one, the cameras come on. Ronen Ayres, this book, I've said to you before, books are the new business cards. When you go into meetings and you meet people for the first time, do you just give them a copy of the book?
I'm actually being quite schnorrer at the moment because the print run is a bit small. So you're absolutely right. It is a business card of sorts, but it's quite interesting to now have that title, author. People seem to take you more seriously than a business card.
Little do they know, hey?
Exactly.
So how on earth does one start a book?
So this was a long process, and knowing my chronic ADHD, I enlisted the services of a company in Canada. They happened to be in British Columbia, and throughout COVID, I was part of the 5 a.m. club. We used to wake up and do 2 hours a day for the better part of 6 to 9 months.
Okay. And is that how long it took to write the book?
Yeah. And so basically I was interviewed and was transcripted, and, my issue is getting the thoughts out of my head and onto paper. So if I was left to myself to write it, I would have failed and we wouldn't be here tonight. So I used a company to help pluck the ideas out my head, and they helped
me. Not just ideas, hey?
Yeah.
That just plucked you completely.
Exactly. And
so when you came into the office and Tubbs saw you every morning, Tubbs, was he grumpy as hell? Getting up at 5 can't be good for one.
I'm always grumpy.
Hey Tubbs, what do you think?
No, luckily throughout the process I didn't see it, but I've heard so many stories of how he was going through the most while writing the book, and how he says probably was the most difficult process for him.
Okay, sorry, Tubbs, something has changed between our test and now relating to sound quality. My sense is you've gone onto headphones or something else, but we're struggling to hear you. Okay, now you're on mute, then we'll definitely struggle to hear you.
Just give me 2 seconds, let me just disconnect my headphones.
Okay, that's cool. Perfect. Rubatswe, you're in the legal profession.
There you go.
What happens at the end of the year? Is everyone packing their bags and ready to go on holiday? And while you answer that question, I'm going to ask the people watching us around the world on Zoom, on Facebook, and on YouTube to actually give us a sense of what their Decembers look like. Are they going away? Are people staying at home? If people are traveling, is it local? Is it international? We'd love to actually hear from you and find out what your December plans are. So, Rubatswe, tell us what happens in the legal world over December.
Well, all the big wigs jet off to Cape Town or somewhere else in the country, and they leave the little people to hold down the fort and make sure that the company is still standing come January. So no leave for me. I'll be with Danny working through December, making sure that any fires are put out to the best of my ability.
There's no shame in that. It's fine. It's fine.
I reckon you have to light the fire. There's no shame in lighting the fire. And I think that's part of our discussion this evening. So yes. Gabi, Farber, there's an interesting December ahead of us. We have the ANC elective conference coming up starting on the 15th. You're wearing your ANC duk on top of your head. Are you going to be attending the elective conference? Are we going to have an election? What's your take on what's happening at the moment?
So thank God, I am going to be going to the conference from the 16th to the 20th. Besides for Shabbos, I've told them that I'm going to have to go home to keep Shabbos, which they were very, very respectful of, which I think is amazing, as they should be. And I think it's going to be very interesting because, unfortunately, the situation with South African politics is you're often having to choose the better out of the worst. Maybe that's also, I guess, politics in the whole world in general. So I'm really happy to be going there to be representing a Jewish voice, but not necessarily a Jewish voice, say, from soldiers or the Jewish Board of Deputies. It's a Jewish voice from within the ANC. And it's going to be very interesting. It's my first conference I'm ever going to. And it will be, I'm a bit nervous, to be honest. And I think it's always important that this whole idea of being in politics is not always glitz and glam. And I guess it's just going to, as you said, going to be very, very interesting to see the outcomes. But as Jews, we need to always be loud and clear about what we want, who we want, when we want, and what kind of picture we want South Africa to look like. But not only must that voice be said, but it must be put into action. And that's why I will be going to the conference, to be putting forward my voice and finding ways that I can implement that plan of action so that we can live in a South Africa that is good for all and safe for all and productive for all people with opportunities, including the Jewish people.
Okay, Gabi, I'm going to tell you that your answer was about 5 times too long. And yes. When we go live at 7, we're about 5 to 7 at the moment, we're going to cut you short. We've got lots that we want to cover. But Branden, can I predict that the people that you went jolling with last night, because you run nightclubs around Joburg, don't actually care about what happens at the ANC elected conference?
Yeah, most likely, if I'm going to be honest with you.
We like some degree of honesty. So what do they care about?
Realistically, I think if it's the people that are just coming out, they just want to have a fun time. It's what they want to do, get drunk, I suppose, and just party.
Okay. And for those people in the commercial world, Alex, like, where were you last night? Were you out drunk and partying? Let's unmute you.
Where was I last night? That's a very good question. I think I've had a crazy week. We're in the busy of raising event around. So I think last night was the first night I got to bed before 3 a.m. in the week from working. So I definitely wasn't partying. Maybe late in December I will be, but I've got a December full of work.
Okay, and we've got a few weeks to go. Before that, Benji, you're a musician, you're a creative, and we have 1 or 2 creatives on the panel tonight. How do you think your world is different as a creative?
Well, I think that I have a sensitivity towards the kind of media that I consume. Like when I go out clubbing or partying, it's often to listen to music, to live music. If I'm not vibing with the kind of music that's at a club, I'm not really interested. I guess I'm constantly looking for social messages that are being put through.
I think we can give you a shameless plug because you just released a single, didn't you?
I did indeed, yes, on Thursday.
tell us about the single and where do we download it?
It's available on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, wherever people listen to music. It's called False Bay. Yeah, it took about a year to create, and it kind of explores an image that I had about a year ago that I was looking across the False Bay, and I was like looking back in time on a previous relationship where I'd literally gone on holiday with her on the other side, you know, on the north coast. So it looked like I was looking across in geography, but back in time, and I kind of really liked that message. So about 6 months later, I found like music that sat with that liminal space really well, and yeah, I found time in matric to write, record, and release it. So yeah.
So you have one more exam left, and then matric is finished for you.
Yeah, and it's my music exam.
So we don't really care.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. No.
And you are a guitarist.
I'm a guitarist and a singer. I do play piano and I do play bass, but guitar and singing are my main things.
That's absolutely amazing. So Ronen, when we were putting this panel together, and we're going to go live with the panel in about 2 minutes, but when we were putting it together, we were comparing when we did the matric class of 2020. And that was really, really dull. No one wanted to stick their heads out. No one had an opinion on anything. Everyone was frightened. But you're quite convinced that this panel tonight is going to be highly opinionated.
I think they'll definitely have opinions, and I'm inviting everyone just to be your authentic self. So bring yourself, bring your A game, bring your opinions, and it's this is a safe room. So the invitation is there, and I'm convinced we're going to have a really interesting chat.
Well, before we do that, let's just talk about whose parents are actually watching them tonight, whose parents or employers, who has a parent or an employer watching tonight. Let's raise a hand.
I hope so.
So is that going to stunt you in any way in answering some of the questions? Who's going to go for that question?
No, I'll happily answer it. I don't think it's going to impact anything. I just heard my mom shout now. I must raise my hand. So if anything, I'll probably hear her third opinion, you know, trying to voice her say.
In fact, Rebecca, when we did the matric class, we asked Junior Rudnicki if there's anything that he wanted his parents to know about him. And he said, well, he actually really wanted his mom to know that he wanted to smoke a joint with her. And I said, well, have you told her? And he said, well, she's watching now. She certainly understands. So everyone, a huge welcome to everyone this evening. The time has just gone 7 p.m. and we've collected an amazing panel this evening, and we're going to be talking about Generation Z. We've got 7 miraculous panelists on, all of them completely different views of the world. And just a huge welcome to everyone, whether you're watching us on Zoom, on YouTube, or on Facebook. Please drop us a comment. Let us know where in the world you're watching us from. Let us know where you're going to be over the December period. And also, please feel part of the conversation. So comment, ask questions, be part of this conversation, and let's probe this younger generation, Generation Z, that we've brought on this evening. So I'm going to ask all of our panelists to turn off their cameras for just 1 or 2 minutes. Danny Kadal, welcome back. Thank you for assisting us this evening. You're on controls tonight. Haven't seen you in a little while.
Hello, Howard. Very nice to be back in action. Yes, it's like riding a bicycle. Zoom webinars. Kind of getting back into the hang of it.
You were at Jewish Achiever Awards last week. What did you think?
Howard, it was spectacular. You delivered everything you promised. My wife didn't believe you when you said there was going to be trapeze artists swinging from the chandeliers, and there were trapeze artists reenacting scenes of the Matrix. There were balloons, there was glitter popping over the place, and we ate until I don't think I didn't eat the following week. We ate until we platzed. So well done. It was a remarkable event, and I love the nominees and the winners. No, like really, I actually said to my wife, I think it was we had one of the best caliber winners I've ever seen in an Achiever Awards. It was remarkable.
And I think what we've defined is we won't be defined by our numbers. We still have a remarkable, vibrant, enthusiastic community doing amazing, amazing work. So I think that was the main lesson that we take out of Jewish Achiever Awards this year. But Danny, let us not forget, there's a newspaper, and we publish this week. Next week is our final edition of the newspaper. Let's see what was on the news this week. Of course, Operation Dudula came to Norwood, and thank goodness for CAP, because CAP came out in force in order to protect the community in Norwood. Another amazing story, I think it's on page 3, is the story of what's happening to the Ukrainian Jewish community. You know, there are about 35,000 Jews in Ukraine. Their electricity has been cut off. They're struggling for food. The war between Russia and Ukraine has really put them in an enormously difficult position. So read all about that in this week's copy of the Jewish Report. You can pick up the Jewish Report in about 242 locations around the country, all of it free of charge. So go to your Spar, your Checkers, your Pick and Pay, your garage shop, your shul, your butchery, exclusive books, CNA. You'll find us absolutely everywhere. And if you can't get a hard copy, don't forget, you can also visit us online, www.sajr.co.za. So you can go and read either each individual article, or alternatively, you can download the entire edition of the South African Jewish Report. It's amazing to see. You see on the front cover over there of our webpage, one of the people we honored this year at Jewish Achiever Awards was Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer Internationally. The man runs approximately $6 trillion company, and he accepted an award from us, and it was just such an honor and privilege to be able to give him an award for the efforts that he put into and that Pfizer put in beating the COVID pandemic. So read all about it, this week's edition of the Jewish Report. Don't miss it. One last edition left this year before we send everyone away on holiday for a few weeks. So, so please don't forget, pick up your copy, probably online Wednesday night. Thursday, they deliver to the stores. You can pick up your copy before you go on holiday this year. Danny, anything else you want to tell us?
Howard, I'm good. I will humbly leave it now to this incredible panel of Gen Z to entertain us and enthrall us this evening.
Well, I want to drop a hint to you and Ronen. Ronen, we have secured an unbelievable guest for one of our January webinars. Who do you think is the greatest South African sportsman of all time?
Jewish or not Jewish?
The greatest South African sportsman of all time. You're allowed to be wrong, but you have to guess.
Joel Stransky.
I was literally thinking Joel Stransky, but that's a Jewish perspective. I was actually thinking Francois Pienaar, but also maybe it's just a bit of nostalgia there from the World Cup.
I can do better than that. End of January. Yeah. Tune in. Gary Player will be talking about his life and times as South Africa's most successful sportsperson of all time. And it's going to be not just for golfers. It's going to be for everyone. Gary Player is going to be talking about not just his life on the golf course, but his life representing South Africa and his great philosophy that he has and so much to impart and share with all of us. So we'll see you on that one towards the end of January. Before we go, Ronen, you've just written a book. Danny, can you show us what Ronen's book looked like? I've got a copy here. It's called Breach. And Ronen, we keep on joking that books are the new business cards. So, so tell us about this book, Ronen.
So I remember years ago, probably it was over 10 years ago, I was taking a walk through the redwoods in California, happened to be with my aunt, and we were talking about life and philosophy and all good things. And I remember at that time thinking, I'd love to write a book. I had no idea what I'd be writing on, but I figured a book would be a good way to get a message out into the world and really shift perspectives and opinions. At that stage, I really didn't have subject material, and I had no clue what it would be. And it just so happened in COVID, when I was kind of lying on the couch, it was probably after 3 weeks of lockdown. I had Netflix on in the background. I had my laptop on me. I was on the couch and about to take my 5th Zoom call for the day. And I remember just having this lucid thought. And the thought was something like, they were right. And who was I speaking about? So I was speaking about young people. So for many years, probably about 10 years preceding that, or you could say for the last 20 years that I've been in youth, is I've been brought into boardrooms to help explain or help corporate executives understand younger generations. And so the big thing has been, or the underlying tone was always, we know the importance of young people, but when we hire them, they suddenly come into our organizations and they're like aliens. And how do we make them more like us? And I remember that moment on the couch thinking that a pandemic has forced us to change our ways, to change how we do things, that work remotely, suddenly flexibility, we could go for walks during the day, we had more agency of our time. And I remember at that stage, I had subject material to write on. And that was really my idea, was not only a pandemic that helped shift us and really force us to change, but how young people are forcing us to really look at our own beliefs and how they're breaching the world.
So Danny's going to take down the picture, but he is going to post on the YouTube chat, on the Facebook chat, and on the Zoom chat, where people can pick up a copy of the book. But René, explain to us, what is the underlying message of this book?
The underlying message is that as we get older, it gets harder to change. So most of us know the areas that we want to change. And generally we have this internal resistance because we have such hard beliefs that we've kind of locked in our brains over time through experience. And what you're getting is every 10 to 20 years, there's a replenishment of a new generation that's coming in. And they come in just like, if you think of it, like when you get a new phone or you get a new laptop, they come with a software upgrade. So what happens when you get a software upgrade? You get new features, there's new cool things and shiny things, and it looks better. But it also fixes some bugs. And what this message is, or the message in the book, is really how to understand this new software that's arrived in the world. So young people.
It's about Generation Z. Just explain to us, who are they? What age group is that?
So generally, you're looking at people that were born from 1995 onwards, generally 2000 and onwards, but it goes back to 1995. And really, you're looking at the generation that kind of grew up when their first kind of rational thoughts were probably in the middle of the 2008 financial crisis, where right around the world, they were really born into a crappy world, a world that's really like the environment has been stuffed up. They saw the financial crisis, their parents lose their homes, jobs, and all of those kind of things. So they are true digital natives. So they don't know a world of analog. So that's one of the key features of this upgrade, is that they're so comfortable in both worlds, where you and I, we're part comfortable in the analog world and part in the virtual world. They're totally comfortable living in the virtual world. And so they come with a whole set of unique settings, I call them. Their factory settings are slightly different to ours.
So give us some examples of what these factory settings look like. Let's select 3 things that they make them different to other generations, because what generation Y was before that, is that correct?
X.
Okay,
so,
X and Y before, and millennial.
We had Generation X, millennial, Gen Z.
Okay, so what's unique about Gen Z?
So first, if you look at millennials could have got a bad rap, but some of them were really bad. And really, they were seen as the entitled generation. They were seen as lazy, entitled, highly anxious, and really, really uncertain and anxious. And what you've got in this upgrade, which I'd like to think of it, is Generation Z has kind of come with a higher purpose mission. And their higher purpose mission as a collective is to fix the broken world that they came into. And so they've come in and they're unapologetic. So if you think of the world we grew up in, we had suck up a lot of things and keep quiet. This generation is unapologetic about their views, and they're happy to share it with you, and they're happy to cancel you, and they're happy to leave your company or stage a revolt if things don't, if they don't like the conditions. They also live by a set of values. And so even when it comes to buying brands, and we'll chat about it later, they really assess a brand with the kind of stand that a brand would take on either stuff like the environment or gender diversity or any of the things that before it was just a product, it was just about the price and the positioning and the coolness. This now there's a whole values kind of layer. And there are a few more, but the one that I'd really like to focus on is mental health is a big thing. So if anything, this generation has outed mental health. They've put it on the table and said, this is a big issue. And it's a massive issue for them. It's almost been passed down by generations, but they're prepared to talk about it, be vulnerable about it. And like I said before, they would leave a company if they feel their mental health is at stake.
So,
even if they went home to do nothing.
Ronen, when you speak to employers and people coming into law firms, into banks today, recruiting Generation Z, what advice do you give them?
So the big thing is it's asymmetrical. It's not fair. So from an employer's point of view, you're looking to hire people for the long term. Younger people are looking for an employer to guide them to their greatness. And while an employer is looking to get married, a young person's looking at an employer basically like a date on Tinder. So it's not a fair kind of interaction because one's looking for the long term and one's really looking, do my values and my dreams, my hopes, dreams, and values match that of the company? And so it's not just the values you've got on a post on the wall. It's how you represent yourself on social media. They do a lot of research. They look at conditions in the workplace. They try to find out from people inside what the reality is, because really this generation is all about finding the truth. They've grown up in a world where there's so much fake stuff that they're seeking the truth. And so for employers, you've really got to present your best foot forward. You've really got to try hard. You've really got to be a constant presence as opposed to just showing up once. And you've got to walk your talk.
So are they selfish? Is it only about them and their values, or do they believe in a greater good?
I think it's a bit of both. So it's, the previous generation it's all about me. The upgrade is, it's about me first, and I believe in the greater good. So we're living in a world of and not all. And so the big thing about this generation is they're so big on authenticity. So like every one of them that I've met is all about expressing their authenticity in a unique way, whether it's the way they dress, it's the way they talk, what's, the statuses they put up. Everything is about being authentic. And that's been the big thing that I've seen.
Someone who's going by the name Anonymous says, do you think they are the marshmallow generation with very little resilience and too much self-obsessive sensitivities?
Yeah, so, it's first Gen me, and then as a collective, I see them as Gen we. And so as parents, I don't think we've done a great job in terms of building their resilience muscle. So on the one side, you can see when things get tough, they could cash out. They could unsubscribe and leave the situation. And on the other hand, I see it as us, as the older generations, not to necessarily hold on to our beliefs, but to kind of guide them from the side and help them to be more resilient. So I don't think it's kind of embedded in their app to be resilient. They're certainly ambitious. They're certainly fresh and exciting. And they've got their fake radar out to spot anything, but they do need help in being more resilient. It's not that they're against it.
this entire concept of cancel culture, how does that fit into Generation Z? They seem to aggressively go after people they don't agree with, to try punish them, put them in a box.
Yeah, and I don't think it's all fair, but it's certainly, we're living in an age where you have to be careful what you say in a public domain, whether that's on a WhatsApp group, whether it's on Twitter or Instagram, is that if you put it out there and you can face this collective wave of resistance that will literally decide whether you live or die on social media from that point onwards. So this generation is not a tolerant generation. They will call you out, and that's this unapologetic side of them is they'll call you out. And it's not just if you're Kanye West. This is like if you're an employer, you've got to be careful about internal kind of resistances that pop up. You can have an internal pogrom if you don't walk your talk.
So, Ronen, let's talk about Kanye West, because some of the heroes of that generation sometimes rise and then fall. Who does that generation look up to?
Well, I think that's a good question to ask the panel when we get on. But it really goes with their values. So it's interesting when you see the kind of people that, say, a brand like Nike sponsors. They're very interested in the values of those kind of celebrities that hold values that connect with theirs. The other thing is you probably won't find many politicians that say they're their heroes. So definitely people who have achieved great things in business, and I would say celebrities and sports people that have the same values. That's it.
I'm going to ask you in a second about South Africa Gen Zs. And is there a difference between Gen Z in different races in South Africa? Is there a difference between South African Gen Zs and American or British or French Gen Zs? I'm going to ask you that in a second. But first, Victor says, as head of the school, these traits mentioned by Ronen are seen by me on a daily basis, looking for us as teachers to be consistent and authentic. Disciplining pastoral care becomes difficult too. Our counseling psychologist is working harder than ever before.
Yeah, and so you see this, Victor, in the workplace too. And what I write in my book is I think the new position in a company is called a momager. Instead of a manager, it's mom and a manager, because what we're seeing is young people are coming into the workplace. And what you see in South Africa, and I can't speak generally around the world, is that there's generally an absent parent. And what young people are looking for from their manager or from their leadership team is almost the idealistic parent to nurture them to their greatness. Guide me to my greatness, and you've got to be there for me. So it's almost a separate job title, because you spend most of your time needing to support and nurture the young generation. They really need it.
So talk to us about the difference between race, access to wealth and privilege, South Africa versus Gen Z and other places in the world.
You know, you'd be surprised how similar Gen Z are around the world. And we should also be careful not to have this blanket view. It's Gen Z, so they're all the same. Remember, just think of it as a clump of uniqueness. And there's many clumps that are similar and many that are different. And so it's important to see them that they're a cross-section of society, but they're not necessarily like aliens. They're still like us. They just have different settings. So what you see very similar around the world is you can take things like you spoke about cancel culture. There's gender diversity and fluidity. So that is a massive thing. So if you look at even brands today and the kind of imagery that they have to use, it has to be inclusive. You have to be very careful around, pronouns, gender diversity, how things are presented. And so the subtle differences between the developing world and maybe the developed world is really access to things like better education, better technology, and opportunities. But what you see in South Africa is pretty much representative of a small minority of privilege, and then there's a long tail of underprivileged Gen Zs. And really, you know, the statistics aren't great. If you look at 2/3 of probably youth are unemployed, at least, or up to 75%. And you've got probably a fraction that are going to universities, and of those that are graduating, there are not many formal jobs waiting for them. So on the one side, things are really bleak, and on the other side, this is a generation that really excites me because they're making a plan. A lot of them have side hustles. A lot of them have started businesses through Instagram. A lot of them are doing remote work. They're learning skills on TikTok and working from their home in a township, but they're doing overseas or global work remotely. And so this is a generation that's not just going to sit back and be in a victim mode. They're actually action orientated and making things happen.
So Renee, we're going to bring on the panel in another 2 or 3 minutes, and we've got 7 remarkable panelists that we're going to be talking to tonight. But the question that I want to ask is the question that I asked at your book launch. And I told the story. I told the story of a friend of mine who works at one of the big banks, and told a very similar story to the story that you're telling tonight, that when they interview new staff, one of the requirements of the new staff is, what does the bank do for the underprivileged? What is the bank doing in the township? And if you can't answer those questions, then they don't want to work with you. They don't accept your job offer. But once they do accept the job offer, and the bank comes back to them and says, great, this was an issue of big concern to you, come join us on the weekend, we're going into the townships, we're going to fix things, they say, sorry, we're busy. So my question that I pose from the story is it all talk? Is it deeply held inside, but are they willing to actually go and get their hands dirty to change the world?
So the story that you tell is absolutely correct. And I've seen it for the last decade. And I would say that would be more of a hallmark from the previous generation. The younger generation coming in seriously look at the company according to their values and what they're doing for the communities. Will they pitch up on a Saturday morning when the bus arrives for them to go do the community work? Probably a lot more than the previous generation. What I'd suggest to employers is really to make the young people the champion of the cause and let them get others to get involved. Instead of them being the passengers, make them the drivers. And what I've seen there is you get 100x results instead of just asking them to volunteer.
So with that, Ronen, we're going to ask our panelists to turn on their cameras. Please join us this evening. There's an amazing group of people that we have on, and we've got some people in load shedding. So we'll try see whoever that we can. Tubbs, I don't know if you can turn on your camera even if you're dark for a second, but you're on load shedding.
Yeah, Howard, it's completely dark. It's on right now, and you can't
really?
See.
It's not easy being a black man in the dark, eh?
At all.
So Howard, why don't we start with the first question to the panel? How does load shedding get to you?
So let's start with Tubbs.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Howard. I mean, I think it's a huge inconvenience. You know, I think this is a great cause, this great webinar, but it really inconveniences a lot with a lot of stuff that you're doing. And the current energy crisis in South Africa that we are seeing right now is pretty detrimental. I mean, just looking at it from a small business point of view, a lot of small businesses are shutting down and losing a lot of loss of income purely because of load shedding. So that's just one of the effects that's happening on a smaller scale. I can just imagine on a micro scale what it's doing to our country.
Tubbs, just before we move on and we ask that question to someone else, give us a 10-second version of yourself. Seeing we can't see you, tell us a little about yourself.
Cool, and no stress. So I'm a young professional. I currently work in the youth marketing section, but I do run two businesses. I'm in property. More so I run student accommodation. I house about 160 students currently. And my second business that I have billboards across Joburg.
Amazing. Alex, talk to us about how load shedding affects your life.
So I think it depends where I am in the country. If it's in Joburg, it certainly affects me a lot more than when I'm in Cape Town. You know, there's quite a big difference between our load shedding schedules. I think we're quite lucky in terms of me and my company, where we work on a day-to-day basis. We've got sort of a backup electricity supply, which makes a huge difference. I think you take it for granted until you're sort of taken out of that situation. But I'm very cognizant, you know, that majority of business owners in South Africa, particularly your small business owners, you know, don't have access to that type of privilege. So I think it's hugely detrimental to the whole country.
You mentioned your business. Tell us a little about your business.
So I've got a biotechnology startup that operates in the regenerative medicine space. It sort of started as an extension of a career-ending injury that my horse sort of sustained a few years ago. And it turned out a lot more people sort of had the same problem I did. And in sort of creating a solution for her, I realized there was a huge opportunity to solve a lot of people's other problems. And now we're looking at solving some pretty big problems in the human sphere, which is quite exciting.
That's amazing. So Branden, let's say you come out of a different world. You running Greenhouse and Live and Babylon clubs. If you could have dinner with anyone in the world, who would it be?
Well, I'm going to take the sports personality out of me here, and I'm probably going to say, you know, if I could ideally say like Lionel Messi. For me, obviously, that has nothing to do with the club scene, but for me, it's just sports, and he, for me, is just amazing. I feel like he would be a fun person to just go out with and hear his stories, whether it's over a drink or just, for me, that's it.
Rabatwe, who would you like to have a meal with?
I thought really hard about this, and I think if I'm being honest, the answer would probably be my mother. I lost her last year. So I find myself really wanting to hear her insights the older I get, and I would love to have lunch with her one more time.
Amazing. Mike, on your side?
Also, sports fan in me is going to come out now. If I'm talking about someone, it would probably be Jurgen Klopp. Just as a massive Liverpool fan, seeing what he's done for the club, how he's turned it around from like almost falling to pieces is just insane. And just being able to speak to him would be something that would be really, really cool for me.
Am I allowed to say I pushed Jurgen Klopp out of the way because he was standing between me and Sia Khaleesi? I had no idea who he was. And then I gave him my camera and asked him to please take a picture of Sia and myself.
Really?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Anyway.
Ronen, you wanted to ask people about what made them unique and special.
Yeah, I think, you know, this generation really values authenticity. And authenticity is often expressed in different ways. And so what authenticity means to one person will be different to the next. And I don't know, who wants to go first? Maybe the musician, maybe Benji, you want to say, like, how, besides for your glorious moustache, how do you express yourself? How do you show your authentic self?
Yeah, I think that's a difficult question. But I think that I express myself authentically through music. I try to be honest with people, with myself, and in my writing and my art. I guess music is art. And I think that's a very valuable thing to have, is to be authentic, to be who you are. And yeah.
And Gabi, do you find it the same thing, so important to be authentically you, and how do you express it?
I think it's absolutely everything. And I think what's really nice about this generation when it comes to authenticity is we've kind of stopped with, excuse my language, the bullshit of everything's perfect, everything's glamorous, everything's amazing. People are more accepting of saying, oh, I struggle with mental health, or, oh, I don't come from the most perfect life. And I think, I know for me, in the previous generation, like sometimes my mom will say, Gabi, you don't need to tell them everything, you know, and I think it's so important that also parents, whoever's watching this, encourage people to hang their dirty laundry out, because everyone has it. And when you are able to express that something's not easy, it gives the opportunity for someone else in that generation, in the world, who's struggling with those same issues, to express their authenticity. And authenticity also comes with ugly sides, and it's important to show them.
May I interject a question to Gabi, because you're sitting there with your ANC book on. You're a frum religious Jewish woman, and you're the spokesperson of the ANC Women's League and Deputy Secretary General of the ANC Youth League. You wouldn't think of someone like yourself in those roles. When you go and
definitely not.
When you go and explain yourself to people, what is their reaction, and how do you cope with their reaction?
So I think I get very different reactions. I get a reaction, some people screaming down my throat and saying, how dare you be part of the ANC, you Jewish, they anti-Israel, they're ruining our country. And then I get on the other spectrum, wow, that's amazing, you're doing change, it's so nice to see a white person in the ANC, it's so nice to see a Jewish person in the ANC. And then you think people like, oi, you know, something's obviously wrong. And then you also get the, like, shame, she's so stupid, you know, rather go get your nails done and sit at Frangelica's. It's a much better laugh. And because there's such a diverse amount of reactions, it's important for me that I know what I am, who I am, and why I'm doing it. Because otherwise, every time I get a different reaction, I'm going to be so susceptible to either being like, yeah, you're right, I am, what I'm doing is stupid, or yeah, you're right, what I'm doing is amazing, let me continue. And especially in Generation Z, where everyone feels free to give their opinion on everything, it's important that we know our own opinion before going out and hearing everyone's opinion.
So Gabi, let me ask you one question, because you mentioned why. I'm going to ask you the question, why are you doing this? Why aren't you at Frangelica's?
Let's not get things wrong. I'm still at Frangelica's every week, and all the waiters are very proud. They all call me comrade when I go in there. Why I decided to do it was, I mean, we all sit at the Shabbos table, and constantly you'd hear people complaining, this country, the ANC, this country. And I actually really did love my life here. And I decided, I guess it was something that was really ingrained in me from when I was young, being a Shiva College, B'nai Akiva, the family I grew up in, that you mustn't complain until you do something about it. And above that, so there was that on the one hand of me wanting to fix the country, fix the surrounding, and that's not to say that I'm going to fix it, but at least I know that I'm trying to do something instead of just complaining about it. And the second part was with regards to being in the ANC and Jewish, is that I was head of soldiers, and I saw no one in the ANC or at university would work with any Jews on campus, because they already had a preconceived idea of what a Zionist meant and what a Jew meant, that it's a colonizer or racist, and I decided if someone's already viewing you as an enemy, they're never going to engage or take a moment to understand. First, let people see you as a human being, and then the extra parts of you. And so I went in and I showed them what Jewish people are, and didn't tell them that I was Jewish or Zionist. And once they saw that I believe in, democracy, I believe in non-nationalism, I believe in South Africa, I then explained that I'm a Zionist and Jewish. So it's about I'm doing this to change the narrative, I guess, inside the ANC, inside the Jewish community in South Africa, that we can bring change and we need to stop complaining and doing something about it.
Ronen, should we move on to social media? I keep on hearing that Facebook is for grandparents.
Great-grandparents.
Great-grandparents. Can we check with the panel? Give us a thumbs up or thumbs down. Are you on Facebook? Okay. Rebecca, not on Facebook. Tab, so we can't see you. Tell us, yes or no?
Yes, I am.
Okay, let's talk about Instagram. On Instagram or not on Instagram? TikTok. Okay, Mark, I'm going to ask you why you're not on TikTok. I thought that was part of your generation.
Yeah, so I just never really got into the whole TikTok thing. I remember when it started and it was getting big with friends and everything. They sent me TikToks. I just never really felt the need to join in. I thought that YouTube did the job okay. And yeah, never really felt the need to join since. Yeah, I get all the information I need from other places. And yeah, I just don't really feel the need to join.
Barbara's asking our panelists if anyone is on LinkedIn. Who's on LinkedIn? Okay, the professionals are all on LinkedIn. Ronen, you wanted to talk about people earning a living.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, Howie, before we get there, I think the nuance in the social media side is when do you use which medium? So when do you use Facebook? When do you use Snapchat? When do you use Instagram? When do you use TikTok? So give us the different scenarios when you use each app.
Sure, I think I'll go, yeah. Looking at Twitter, I kind of look at it as my daily newspaper. So that's when I go to get current updates, stay in trend. And then looking at Instagram, that's where it's really more content generated. I think Instagram and TikTok are similar for me. That's where I generate content and I pick off content from. Facebook, I do it just to have it as a backup. I'm really not active on Facebook, but it's just there as a profile. So that's how I use my different social media pages.
Cool. What about you, Alex?
Facebook is purely for remembering birthdays in my eyes. That's the only purpose it serves, which is a very, very important one, because otherwise I think, sorry, Mum, if you're watching, but I probably wouldn't remember when everything is. I use LinkedIn quite a lot sort of as a source of news, especially sort of in the biotech sphere. I think one of the things that is quite interesting about LinkedIn is it's quite nice to sort of tailor the type of content you see. Talk a little. I've got one person or like 2 or 3 people I follow, and it's pretty much just my best friend and I sending content back to each other. I don't actually produce any content. And I think sort of similar to what was said earlier, you know, Instagram's a nice thing to scroll through, but I'm not on Snapchat or Twitter or any of those other things, platforms.
What about you, Rebecca? And next we'll go to Branden and then Dylan.
So I'm only on Instagram apart from LinkedIn, and the only content I follow is like people organizing their houses and cleaning. So that's me.
Branden?
Cool.
So I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. I don't do anything on Facebook. It's also just to browse. Instagram, I seldom post. TikTok, I refuse to ever post anything. It's all pretty much just for my own entertainment purposes.
I want to go ask Rebecca, you're now in the working world. Tell us about black tax.
Where do I start? It's very much a real thing, and it's something I've spoken to a lot of my colleagues about. It's something that as a Black professional you struggle with, especially if you come from a background like mine. I don't come from a family that has a lot of professionals or people who've graduated from university. So only 1 or 2 people who are contributing towards the family and the upkeep. So it is a lot. And yeah, it's definitely something that a lot of us are dealing with.
But let's get practical about it. What does it mean? So does it mean you cannot go back home without packets?
It means that there are constant messages from uncles or aunts who are asking for help with one thing or another. I support my 2 younger sisters. That means every month I'm doing groceries for 2 households, theirs and my own. And yeah, that it means I'm contributing to their upkeep, and whatever they need, I help provide. And yeah, it's like I said, it is a lot. It's a story that's shared. And for me, I'm lucky I'm contributing downwards a lot of the time, but I have peers who are contributing towards siblings and maybe children, but also upwards towards their parents. And it's very much a real thing.
Tubbs, is that part of your life as well?
Yeah, most definitely. I think I see it around me like all the time. I think regarding my case, I'm very fortunate that I am the last born. So I have 3 siblings in front of me. So it really was a bit of an ease. But chatting to my sister, who was the firstborn, it does weigh a lot on you because you're not just pushing for yourself, not just working for yourself. You really are the light for the whole family. So everything you do, you need to think about 4 or 5 different individuals. So it does weigh down on you a lot. And like Rose said, we know December when we go home, you cannot come home empty-handed. You need to come home with packets. You need to come home with something. I think that's just a traditional standard thing. So it definitely is evident.
So I think to sum it up, what I've seen and what we've seen in our research groups is around black tax is you have young professionals or hustlers or business people coming in who have these great hopes and dreams. And really what it does is it stunts your progress, because you really want to buy a new car, or you really want to move out of home, or you want to go on holiday, or you need new tires on your car, but it's just you're being pulled down by the responsibility of looking after those around you. And I think that's been, if you wanted to sum it up, that's probably, is that accurate? Yeah.
Absolutely, Ronan.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the after effects of COVID. Many of us spent almost 2 years sitting at home, and I want to know how we've readjusted back into the world. So when it's come down to university lectures or school lectures, do you prefer online or sitting in a classroom? Do you prefer watching a concert on YouTube or going to a live event? Do you do your shopping online, or do you actually go into a Checkers, a Pick n Pay, a Boxer store? Branden, let's start with you.
It's a bit of both. If it comes down to learning and whatnot, when I was in matric in 2020, having to do school online, hated it. Varsity online wasn't for me. But if I'm going to a concert, you be there. To go shopping, you in person. Like, it's a 50-50 for me. Like, certain things I will be there, certain things I prefer not to.
Michael, you sitting in Cape Town working for Later Sightings. Obviously, head office is in Joburg. You're not in the head office.
I'm Joburg based.
Oh, sorry, you're in Joburg. Sorry,
Yeah.
forgive me. You're in Joburg. So how do you prefer working at home, or you mentioned earlier that you do work from home?
So when COVID came around, I mean, a lot of things changed. So with regards to working for Later Sightings, that all moved online, and that for me, I find to be preferable because it's something I can do from home. It's on a Sunday anyway, so there's no one else at the office. So I'd be sitting at the office by myself regardless. And it's more convenient to be working from home. But with something like university, I feel like because it hit during second and third year of undergrad, and by the time we got back, undergrad was finished, that's like an entire development in my life that I never really got exposed to. And that's why this year, as we started to phase back into lectures, I felt like the experience of university got substantially better. So, I mean, there were certain positives, but I think the negatives were substantially more prevalent because, I mean, from our side, I had no work out of the home. I had no varsity out of the home. During the first year, people were like too scared to meet up. I didn't really see people. So you'd spend like literally weeks without leaving the house. And if you left the house, it was either to go for a walk or to go to the shops. And it's crazy to think that that was literally only a year ago.
Alex, within your business, so you're allowing people to work from home, or are you forcing people into the office?
So I'm not going to lie, COVID for me was actually quite good, because I think for 2 years I was forced to stay at home. And when you're forced to stay at home, there's nothing much more to do other than to sort of work on your business. And I think 2 years down the line, we've definitely seen the sort of effects of that. I mean, I think the company's grown at in excess of 150% growth rate year on year, which during a pandemic as a startup is not something you often see. During COVID, for the first few lockdowns, everyone worked remotely. Luckily, we were in the position where that sort of happened. Even now, there are a lot of people who still work remotely. We've got a bit of a hybrid system where there's certain days people have to come into the office, and other days they can work wherever they want as long as the work gets done. I've got strong opinions as to the productivity between the two. I wouldn't quite say it's the same. So when I'm sort of up country traveling and everyone's in the office, it also questions as to if the productivity is the same level, but I guess that's what it is these days. I personally, I must say, I think also I was sort of finishing up my master's when COVID hit. I was a bit of a part-time university student to start off with, because I was more, not at university than I was. So for me, the online lectures suited me down to the ground, particularly because they were recorded. I could never attend an online concert, and I absolutely hate shopping online. So that's my experience.
Ronen, should we talk about the biggest issues in the world that face this generation?
Yeah, so before we get to that, because just based on this question, I'm just fascinated, because a lot of the studies say that why young professionals, when they join organizations, one of the biggest reasons they join is around a values match, and then they want learning and development and growth. And between number 2 or 3 is flexibility. And so COVID kind of got us in the mood. And I just want to follow on from the last question and just find out what is behind this thing of flexibility. Who wants to jump first?
I'm happy to answer. So with that question, the question before, I know I actually struggled going back from COVID, because COVID gave me the ability to have a lot more flexibility. We did a lot of political stuff, and I wouldn't have to go into lectures. I could just come at home and quickly listen to a lecture late at night, do an assignment from home. And that's because I think with this generation is we all kind of, we like to do a lot of things at the same time. It's not just like from 9 to 5, I'm going to sit at my desk and do a job. Here, you want to be able to do multiple things at the same time. And that's why flexibility and COVID gave us that opportunity, that we could be going out with friends, listening to a lecture on the way home, and writing a test at night, and then also go and give a political lecture on Zoom. And with COVID coming back, yes, it's amazing to go into university and hear these lectures, but it's quite hard to do that transition, because now you don't have as much flexibility as before.
Okay, Ria, what do you have to say about that?
So I'm happy to speak to this, because when I started working, which was last year, January, I immediately stepped into the world of remote working. And as a candidate attorney, that was very challenging, because you anticipate to want to be around your principal, to be trained properly, to become a good lawyer. But I think what remote working taught me is that that's not really the case. I was able to speak to my principal twice, 3 times a day on Zoom, on Teams. And I think you're speaking to flexibility, but what I think is important to us, if I may, is more control over our lives. I want to know that there's a certain amount of control I have of what my day looks like, over when I need to be somewhere, over the kind of work I can produce and when. And I think that's what's most important. So the flexibility, but also just the ability to control how our lives, how our days play out.
It's all around agency over your time. Benj, what do you have to say?
I was just going to echo what Ria Butsworth said, which is that like, I find that it's not necessarily about flexibility. I quite like having a structure, but I'd like to be the person who dictates that structure. And yeah.
So the underlying tone is don't tell me what to do and don't tell me how to do it. I'll get the job done, but I'll do it in my own way and in my own time. So why is it important to still go into the office in your opinion? Maybe let's start with Alex, who has an office. Tabs, maybe you jump in after.
Listen, I sort of have to go into the office because it's my company. So if I don't, things will go horribly wrong. So I'm maybe not the best person to answer it. But my experience, there's a certain sort of synergy that comes from people being together in the same room, bouncing ideas off each other, brainstorming, coming up with new ways to tackle the same problems. And I just don't personally find you get that when you are working remotely, or at least I don't experience it to the same degree. The most productive meetings sort of I feel that the team has is when we're all in the same room. It's also a really efficient way to waste time if it's not managed properly. And I think that frustrates a lot of people. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I think there's a lot of merits to it, but I think there's also a lot of that aren't ideal. What I can say sort of from a business point of view is I think because we've seen this move towards remote working, what I do think it means is it's a lot easier to access talent in different locations if you are flexible on it, which I don't think was as easy to do previously. And that sort of has introduced quite an interesting dynamic to the marketplace. And I think the people who are most happy to do that, or where the biggest value for money comes in, is especially in the Gen Z category.
Got it. Okay, now we're going to really shift things up and get things moving here. This is a question you guys don't know about. So if you had to think, what's wrong in the world today? So think of the biggest issue that is close to your heart, and I want you to associate it with you being a minister in government, and you got to sort it out. So I want you to tell me, which minister are you, and what issue are you going to sort out?
And Ronen, while we do that, for those people who are watching us on Zoom this evening, we're actually going to do a poll, and we're going to ask people watching us on Zoom to actually vote while the panel discusses this. Okay. So let's start with Michael. Mike, what's your biggest issue?
If I were to pick a big issue, it's literally impossible to pick just one. I feel like on a global scale, one of the biggest issues, for example, would be like the prevalence of war. And it's just consisting you can see now with Russia, Ukraine, in the Middle East, it's just never ending. But within South Africa, I feel like a bigger issue would be firstly corruption within government. And then extending from that is the kind of reality that Africa as a whole has never really been able to fully step into its own mold. It's never really been able to step away from the legacy of colonialism, because Western interests have always continued to keep a hand over the continent and make sure it constantly shifts with whatever the Western interest wants the continent to be doing. So if I were to fix it, I feel like it would be something that would be a lot bigger than just one person. I feel like as a collective going forward, there needs to be a general consensus both within South Africa and around Africa as a whole that such issues do exist and they need to be addressed.
Got it. What about Branden?
You see, for me, it's a tough one to answer because I found myself very non-political. I normally stray away from anything to do with that.
What's close to your heart? What's wrong in the world today?
Realistically, it has to probably be all the hate and the hate towards discriminations of gender or race and ethnicity, anything to do with that. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't. It truly doesn't. We all the same. We all bleed the same color. It doesn't make a difference. Why is there such an issue?
Got it. Tabs?
Yeah, I think definitely to add on to Branden, I think there's so much wrong in the world, but it's definitely the discrimination and racism. As a young Black man in South Africa, I experience it almost every day. So it's something that we really can't run away from. And I think just to tie from that, it would also be the unemployment and just the general state of our economy of South Africa. I think those are probably the top two, not to mention corruption. Like I just said, there's just so much that is wrong, but I think I'll just nitpick those three.
Cool. Benj?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in South Africa and in the world, the most pressing issues is definitely the wealth inequality and the concentration of power within certain groups, be it those groups are based on race or gender. I'm running for Minister of Finance if anybody's interested, but I do think that we need proper social welfare programs in our country. Yes, corruption hinders that, but we need proper systems to enable people to close the gap of the wealth inequality, which then opens up more access to opportunities and resources.
Can we share the results just very quickly before we go on? So we asked people, 10% said climate change, 15% said war and instability, 9% said the erosion of morality and religion, 33% said corruption, 27% said the economy, unemployment and inflation, acceptance was 1%, racism was 2%, other 2%. So the biggest issue of the people watching us on Zoom tonight appears to be corruption, followed by the economy, unemployment and inflation.
That's really interesting. Does anyone in the panel disagree with that or have slightly different views on those? Gabi, you look like you're either raising your hand or stretching. And you're on mute.
Was raising my hand. I think one of the biggest problems in this country is education. And I think that a lot of the issues stem from the lack of education or bad quality education. That when you don't have education and proper education, you're going to make corrupt decisions because you're not going to make your decisions from a place of education. You're going to be making your decision from a position of how can I benefit myself more. You're going to be making it from a personal choice and not an educated choice. And that goes the same with our economy, with inflation, with racism. When you're racist towards another person, that's an uneducated opinion because at the end of the day, it's just, our skin color that's different. And I think in our country specifically, we really have a problem with education. And it doesn't only, while I'm involved in fighting for education on a tertiary level, I think that's, we really need to go back to the bottom. And so I would like to go on, and if I was a minister, I would want to be the Minister of Education and start right from the beginning. You have students where there's like over 100 students in one class with one teacher with zero resources. If we want to fix this country, we need to create an educated country.
Thanks, Gabi. Mike?
So I just wanted to add on to that because I feel like everything that's been said so far is like 100% correct. But so I studied economics at varsity for my postgrad, and we covered a course specifically around South African development and the space for South Africa to continually develop. And again, the key point that got put forward in the first lecture and carried on through is that the most important thing is development, because without development, you can't have education, and without education, you can't have development. Same applies for health, same applies for technological progress, etc. And it feels like within this country over the last 20 or so years, there was a prime moment to push forward with development. And instead of doing that, there was a massive stagnation. And the effects of that have meant that instead of developing, we stagnated massively. And because of that stagnation, we've now got things like load shedding, inflation, a crippling economy that's like falling to pieces. And unless we can get development started, it's not going to fix itself. But as long as it continues to persist, development can never start. So it's a bit of a very, very difficult situation that I think everything kind of pulls out of.
Cool. Alex?
No, I totally agree with it. I see it as sort of two issues, and I'd really love Gabi to speak to the second point I'm going to sort of speak to just now. I think if I were to do something about it, a bit controversial, but I would probably privatize the education system. If you look at South Africa and the budget we allocate to education compared to a lot of other countries, it is absolutely massive. it's not a case that we don't have enough money going towards education. It's a case of we've got this massive mismanagement around the money. So I think quite an interesting approach that I was discussing with someone at dinner this past week is you privatize education, you have coupons that you get from SARS on essentially a needs basis. So depending on your tax bracket, if you are the lowest of the lowest of the lowest, where you're struggling to feed your family, you get the largest amount. You can go take that to any privatized school or any private school. The school then redeems that person's school fees from SARS, because we all know we're spending on average the amount of money per child that you need to send to a private school. So you have a needs-based basis like this. Everyone gets a tier 1 private education and you have a lot of issues fixed. I think the biggest concern I have for South Africa and for our government, in order for any of these issues to be addressed, very hard decisions have to be made. And I'm also generally try to stay away from politics because I just think it is such a messy field. But in the lot of actually understanding I've tried to do, and this is what Gabi to speak to, understanding is that ANC to actually make decisions as the president is not nearly as easy as people say or think it is. So they think, if Ramaphosa wanted to do this, he could do it tomorrow. But my understanding, and this is one of the reasons he set up all these different commissions, is the president can't say, okay, I want to fix corruption, I want to fix this, I want to fix that, we're going to do X, Y, Z, because a certain percentage of the party's got to vote to agree for that, for him to even make that decision. So my understanding is that's why he sets up all these different commissions, and then they come up with a conclusion, and then they have to act on it. You can't decide, we're not going to act on it. If they come to X, Y, Z, then you have to do it. But I think South Africa is going to get better. Very hard decisions have to be made, and if there's not a mechanism that supports those hard decisions being made, we're not going to get the outcome we want to. But Gabi, I'd love to hear your
before we get on to Gabi, because we don't want this to be a conversation just between you all. We want to get onto the topic of politics. So I'm going to ask very quickly everyone to tell us where they think they stand on the political spectrum. An answer could be don't care, center left, right, center right, extreme, whatever. Mike, where do you think you stand on the political spectrum?
So both politically and economically would associate myself with more leftist politics.
Rebecca?
So I would say more left as well.
Branden?
Nowhere. I don't involve myself with it. Not.
Okay, Alex?
I'd say center.
Gabi?
Center.
Benji?
Both leftist policies and politically and economically. Yeah.
Tuts?
Definitely more left.
Okay, I'm going to ask everyone now to vote. Should Jacob Zuma go back to jail? Yes or no? Okay, we got some. I'm eyeing. Okay, should Cyril Ramaphosa resign? We've got one no, one yes, no, two yes no's. Okay, can I ask of our panel who voted in the last election? I think the only person is Benji. Maybe you weren't old enough to vote in our last election. Michael, did you vote? Branden, did you vote? Tubbs, did you vote?
I did.
Okay, Rebecca, Alex, you voted. Gabi, you definitely voted, eh?
I actually didn't.
You didn't?
No.
Okay.
That was actually my thing of what's something that people would find interesting. My life was not like this 4 years ago.
Okay. So let's ask another question. Do you think in 2 years' time, in 24 months, you'll still be living in South Africa? Benji, yes. Alex, yes. Gabi, yes. Branden, Not sure. Mike? Not sure?
Branden, is it not sure or not here?
To be honest, I mean, ideally, I probably would stay here. It's just, I mean, I'm settled here, but you never know the future. Who knows?
Yeah, I'd like to ask the panel, what's keeping you in South Africa and what's pulling you abroad? Ria, what about you?
To be quite honest, I feel like my life's calling, my life's mission is very much in South Africa and Southern Africa. It would be easier to go abroad, to live abroad where things work and there are less issues. But I think I feel very called towards working to bettering our country and making it a country I'm happy to live in.
Great. Michael?
So up until literally a few months ago, I never had any intention of living abroad. Like throughout school, throughout university, I was firmly set that I was going to stay here. But over the last few months, just seeing just how fast the country's gotten with regards to load shedding. And I feel like that's just the first thing that everything else is going to stem from. It's now made me start to ask questions about whether it's worth it to look to see if it would be possible to continue studying abroad, just not only to get out of the country, because I really don't want to. I have no intention of leaving here, but just to kind of see what life is like elsewhere and from the outside kind of look in and see what it's like.
Tabs?
Yeah, I'd say I'm very patriotical. So I do have I think I agree with Ria, I have a calling to South Africa, but not just greater than South Africa, just Africa in general, to the development of the country, on the continent. So I definitely don't see myself leaving South Africa. The only time I would leave is unless there's a civil war. But other than that, I would never leave South Africa.
Benj, what happens if you get a recording deal in New York?
I mean, look, my trajectory at the moment is South Africa and Africa. I've got a strong connection with South African music and South African jazz. It's something that has helped me relate to this country as a white Jew living on the tip of Africa. Very much, this is not my continent, and yet, why do I want to be here? What calling that, you know, Ria Batswa and Tabiso have both described, do I also feel? And yeah, I feel very patriotic, and I think that there is a greater responsibility to living in South Africa. You're part of a bigger project, which is our communal nation. And that's not something that you get living in a European country, nor an American country.
Alex, do you agree?
I totally agree. I feel like I also have the sense of a calling, but also to not just to stay here, to make things better. And I think also from like an entrepreneurial point of view, I think Africa is a really sort of interesting space. I think it's, if you structure it the right way, you know, you can be local but still be solving global problems. You in the same time zone as Europe, so from a work point of view, that's really, really good. And I think we've got this massive untapped potential workforce, albeit a lot of it unskilled. There's still a lot of skilled labor. So compared to sort of Europe and especially America, you've got this massive cost arbitrage where you can get, if you look hard enough and if you work hard enough to find them, as good a quality course for a fifth of the price. So I don't think that's worth being discounted. And I also quite strongly feel that if one wants to be in South Africa long term, we all have got to be working together to ensure that it's a country that we all can live in. And if we want to sort of have families in the future that they can also live in eventually.
So Ronen, we've actually got a poll about politics that we'd like to put out as well. We're going to ask people to actually let us know, and they can vote for multiple answers in this. So not just one. We want to know if people believe that Jacob Zuma should go back to jail, if Ramaphosa should resign, if the EFF came in the next election, would they immigrate? Is the DA a white-only party? have we learned to live with the South African nonsense? And I don't think I'll be in South Africa for the next 24 months. So we'd love, as people answer our questions, if our audience could in fact vote as well. And we'll come back and tell you what those results are. But Ronin, we've got probably about another 30 minutes to go with our panel. And we want to get to some of the good, juicy issues of woke culture and cancel culture and dating apps and sex and drugs and religion, because I think this generation has some very interesting perspectives on all of that. But Danny Kadar asked if we could pose this question. What role does religion play in each of your lives? And maybe we can start with Tabs.
And can we broaden that to be spirituality? So it can be religion or spirituality.
Yeah, I think for me, religion plays a huge role in my life. I feel like it's a huge sense of grounding. So just a bit of background, I'm from KZN, so I'm a very traditional man. So on one side, there's culture, which I follow to the T. There's also religion. In terms of religion, I am Roman Catholic. So I feel like being part of religion for me every day, praying every day, really grounds me in whatever I do. So for me, religion in my life is a huge part of my life.
Cool. Let's Roberta.
I echo Tabiso's sentiments. I'm also very, very religious and spiritual. I am Christian, and for me that's innate to who I am. It's innate in how I show up. It's part of my authentic self, and it keeps me grounded. It keeps me.
Cool. Mike?
Right. Yeah. Mike?
So for me, it's a bit of a weird one. And when I've tried to explain it to non-Jewish friends at varsity, they don't really get where I'm coming from. But hopefully, if I explain to Jews, they understand it a bit more, is that I still do a lot of religious things. Like I keep Shabbos, attend shul every second week, keep all the holidays, keep kosher. But I don't necessarily think it comes from a place of religiosity, more so from a place of community. It's something I've done my entire life. It's something that kind of centers me and grounds me, and it's something that I don't really see the point in stopping to do round about now, even if I don't necessarily know how much of it I really believe in entirely.
Branden?
I'm not very religious. I'm obviously proud to be Jewish, and I follow, the fact that I'm Jewish. But I work on Shabbos. I don't keep it, but I still firmly believe that, out of all the people in the world, that this is the life I chose, and I chose to be Jewish, and I'm very proud to just stick to that.
What about you, Alex?
So I've got quite an interesting view on it. I personally am Christian, I'm Catholic. I think it's what I appreciate more so about religion than what the religion is itself is, I think it's one of the things that I think is very wrong with the world, is one of my controversial opinions is a little bit that, religion serves a purpose, and that most religions have got a very strong moral compass. People may disagree with what they are, but it's a certain set of values that governs the way you act. And I think you've seen in the last few decades quite a big move away from that. And I think, unfortunately, what you're seeing is that because you don't have the church or whatever religion you prescribe to, fulfilling that role, you don't really have parents or a lot of parents doing that either. I'm not saying that's the case all the time. That's just what I've observed from my lived experiences. And I think that has some very detrimental consequences. So I quite religious growing up. I had to move a little bit away from it. What is really the point? What is all the things? And then the more I sort of put the two and two together, I've almost found myself going back the other way again. And partly is recognizing the value, I think, in what having a religion, having a moral compass, something that guides you the way you act, what is right, what is wrong. And then part of it is also believing. I definitely do consider myself a believer. But I think discounting the practical parts of religion I don't think it should be discounted either.
Ronin, can I share the results with you of what people thought about politics? So 95% of people thought that Jacob Zuma should go back to jail. 20% thought that Cyril Ramaphosa should resign. 36% said they would immigrate if the EFF win the next election. 6% said the DA is a whites-only party. 44% said they've learned to live with all the South African nonsense. And 7% said they've had enough and they don't think they'll still be in South Africa in 2 years' time.
That's interesting. Okay,
So sorry, Renee.
Howie, let's ramp things up. Let's get into the juicy stuff.
Fantastic. I want to talk about dating apps. Do any of you use dating apps? Michael says no. Gabi, you just got engaged. So if you were, Benji, you use dating apps?
It's kind of a funny story. I did, and I ended up matching with my current girlfriend on Tinder, but we didn't message each other. And I don't know, I don't like it. I don't like dating apps. I just felt compelled to. And then we ended up meeting in person and getting to know each other at Harbonem camp in the middle of the year, and then got together. And then we were like, oh shit, we have actually, we matched. But yeah, so it's like yes, but no.
Rubetzberg, have you ever used a dating app? And Tubbs?
I would say it's kind of a love-hate relationship. So I definitely have periods where I use Tinder and periods where I don't, but I'm a pretty outgoing person. So I meet a lot of people going out, but it is a love-hate relationship.
Is Tinder a dating app or a hookup app?
Oh, it depends how you use it. It really depends how you use it. But the general view is it's a hookup app, to be quite honest.
Branden, what's your view on that?
If I'm gonna be honest, I mean, I have Tinder. I don't really use it. It's more just for observations. But when I was overseas recently, it was nice to have there and have the ability to not have local South Africans on the view.
Okay. How many genders are there, guys? Mike, how many genders are there?
This isn't a question that personally I have any skin in the game on, but I do believe that there's more than enough space within the scientific community to show that gender is a fluid concept. And my own view on the situation is that because I don't have any skin in the game, I'll respect whatever anybody who does has to say about it.
Alex?
Yeah, I'm sort of the same. I feel the same. As many genders as you want, you can have. It doesn't really affect me. I am very tolerant and respectful. You do you, I do me. That's good.
Okay, Gabi, how many genders?
Maybe it's controversial. I think that there should be 2 genders, boy and girl. And I think what's also important with this whole thing of tolerance, that, you know, the left has very much said we must be tolerant of everyone. But it's also important to be tolerant of people who don't agree with your opinion if you're saying be tolerant. So sometimes it's like, it happens often with religious, you know, all religious people must be tolerant, but you must also be tolerant of religious people. That's happened numerous amounts of times. But I think while I might believe that there should only be two genders, that gives me zero right to discriminate, or to a person who says that they don't affiliate to any gender. I need to accept that person, and I have no right to make that person feel uncomfortable or discriminate or make them feel like they're doing something wrong, because what I believe shouldn't affect someone else's lived experience.
Benji and Ria, do you think anything different?
Sorry, I just think to add a little bit to Gabi's point, I mean, as far as I understand it, boy and girl is sex, which is a physical, you know, makeup. But gender is how people are interpreted and engage with society. And that is based on how people and society view different gender roles. And gender roles have changed throughout history, right? And the way that men present themselves have changed throughout history. If you go back to the 15th century, men would wear makeup and high heels, right? And that would be the kings, you know, wearing and standing in fancy positions.
Ask Branden, they still do on a Saturday night at some of these clubs.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying. So I think that gender is how people are interpreted by society, and that is a fluid concept.
Yeah.
Well, I think for me, I also don't have any skin in the game. I am also very tolerant of everyone and how they express themselves and how they appear in society. So I can't say how many genders there are. There are as many as there can be.
So Ronen, why don't we talk about premarital sex? We've got some religious people on the panel. Tubbs, what is virginity overrated?
I think the best way is just to give my honest opinion. For me personally, I think it is a bit overrated, especially in the day in the current modern age that we live in. It is something which is becoming very, very scarce. But I am cognizant and aware that certain religion uphold it very highly. I think I'll speak to my culture, being Zulu, and seeing with the coronation of the king, we have something called the reed dance, where it's only if you're a virgin female, you can only partake in the dance. So it's still upheld in cultures and religions, but in terms like a general view amongst my peers and the people I chat to every day, it is sort of overrated.
Gabi, do you believe in premarital sex?
No. I think that, and maybe it comes from also like an airy theory, but I do think that it's important to keep certain things sacred. And I think it's actually become very uncommon in Generation Z, actually, that in the general concept of keeping stuff sacred, that everyone wants things now. If I can afford the Lamborghini, let me buy it now. If I can have sex with the girl, let me have sex with the girl or boy now. And I think there's so much beauty in keeping some things for another stage in life. I'm personally a virgin, and for me, going into this marriage, it's very weird, you know, living in a world where it's becomes such an uncommon thing to be a virgin. I mean, it is weird, but in the political space, like when I tell people that I'm a virgin, they all are gobsmacked. They think that I'm lying. And it's also, I think, sad that if someone's not doing it for a religious reason, that they staying a virgin until marriage for a religious reason, that's kind of accepted. But if they're doing it for personal belief, they're seen as very weird. And I think that we should debunk that stereotype. People's sexual decisions should be respected and not looked down upon. And I think that we need to, there's certain things that we have to change with the world, and there's certain concepts that I think that we really should revisit. That older generations gave us.
Let's ask Branden, by the time someone gets married, what's an acceptable body count?
Well, I mean, I guess it's subjective to each person, but I mean, for some people it could be like 8, for other people it could be 2. I mean, I guess it just comes down to the person.
Okay, do you have an idea what too many is?
I don't think there's such a number, if I'm going to be honest.
So as we pose this question to some of our other panelists, we're actually going to pose the question as well to our audience. So by the time you get married, how many is too many in terms of a body count? Benji, what do you think?
I mean, I think it can get excessive, to a point. I mean, if you're getting to double digits, or it's like you got to question what's motivating you. Are you just interested in one thing, or interested in meaningful relationships?
Okay, Michael.
I would tend to agree with Benji on this one. I don't think that there's a certain number that suddenly crosses a threshold. I think if, as you go up higher and higher in numbers, it becomes a part of your, like, you know, the way that you view relationships, and that becomes a hindrance to committing to a relationship, that would be a problem. But I mean, that could happen with somebody who has a very low body count, someone who has a very high body count. There's nothing to do with the set number, it's just to do with how a person would change or react to having a certain number.
Tubbs, do you think that white people are more conservative than black people when it comes to this?
When it comes to sex?
Yeah, and premarital sex.
I would say yes, from what I've experienced. I do see a lot of white people being very conservative about sex and how they handle themselves in this regard. From what I've experienced, from my experience, I wouldn't know anything outside of that. So I would say yes, there are conservatives in this regard.
Rebecca?
Again, I can only speak from my own experiences, but I would say that I feel like Black people are more conservative in this regard. I think just in terms of my upbringing and what I saw growing up, it was my white peers that I saw in relationships a lot earlier than myself or anyone else that I knew who was Black.
And Alex, can we ask you, when you see an interracial couple, do you think, oh, wow, the country has progressed? Or do you look and say, okay, that's interesting. Like, does it still in some way surprise you? Or does it warm your heart? Or do you not care?
Do you know what? I think a little bit of both. I think sort of this situation, let me just sort of preface that. To a large extent, I don't notice it. When I do notice it is when I've been in a situation where that hasn't been a norm, and I come back into South Africa where it's become more of a norm, if that makes sense. You know, I think our generation, I mean, this is my sort of lived experience. I think we've sort of grown up with it. It's not like a foreign concept. You know, people who started getting into relationships very early, interracial relationships weren't unheard of. So I don't look at it and get like surprised, like, wow. I don't really have like a thought process around it particularly. It's like another couple walking down the street. But I think in some areas it's definitely not as common. So when you go back into areas after not having seen it, then you maybe become more aware of it. But other than that, not really.
Branden, do you have to like someone before you sleep with them?
I mean, on an emotional level, and there's an emotional level and there's a physical level. I feel like, you know, you could be out having a good night and you just want to have fun, and on that physical level you like them, but on that emotional level I think it comes down to whether it happens again with them. So I think it's just really based on emotional and physical. So, but I mean, you often see in the clubs, people go out, they have a few drinks and they land up going home. They've known each other for very little time. There seems to be a lot potentially of people saying, you know, this sex is not a big thing anymore. It's just part of our lives. It's part of entertainment. No, 100%. It's like, not to say that it's necessarily a good thing, but I mean, at the same time, I don't necessarily it should be frowned upon as much as it necessarily is, or is by the older generations. I feel like it is becoming more of a thing that it's just more common.
So I'm going to ask forgiveness for using a crude term, but there's a term called a fuck buddy, someone who you're friendly with, but who you have sex with as well, but you're not in a relationship with that person. It's just a friend who you sleep with. Mike, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, whatever works for the individual works for the individual. I personally don't see much of a long-term thing there because I feel like it's not really, from my own perspective, practical. But I mean, if it works for people, it works for people. Like, whoever wants to live their life can live their life.
Tubbs?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Mike. I think it's very subjective. It's dependent on the person. For me personally, from my experience, I cannot engage in such because I'm such an emotional person. And just going down to what you asked to Brandon, I need to like you. I need to be able to have a conversation with you before we even get to that level. So if I don't enjoy your energy, if I don't enjoy your vibe, that's where everything's going to end.
So, Ronen, we probably got 2 sections left and about 10 or 15 minutes. I know you want to speak about brands and clothing and shoes and things like that. And then we're going to come on for our last section and talk about drugs. So will you take us through people's attitudes towards their favorite brands?
Yeah, so I think let's start with the bottom-up approach. I want to hear from everyone, what's your favorite sneaker brand, how much you've spent on sneakers, and why is it your favorite brand? So let's start with Tubbs.
No problem. So definitely my favorite sneaker brand is Nike. I spent a large portion of my salary on my sneakers, purely because I like having a good pair of sneakers that would last me a good 2 to 3 years.
How much?
How much for like a
pair cost?
How much, sorry?
How much did your last pair cost?
My last pair cost me 4.2. So but I'll keep those for around 2 years. So on average my sneakers cost me around 3,000, and they're all Nike base. So I really like Nike. I resonate with Nike. I like the brand. I also like what Nike stands for. Just despite the trendy design and everything, I think Nike is one of the very few brands which is a current brand. So it's affiliated with current affairs. So if you look at, for example, there's a football player who was kneeling during the national anthem, and how all brands really ran away from him. But Nike was like, listen, we'll support you. Same with Serena Williams. So that's another reason why I gravitate towards Nike.
Brandon, what about you?
Listen, I mean, I love my shoes. I'd probably also say it's Nike, but I mean, certain shoes I do like Adidas, like Ultra Boost. I love my Ultra Boost, but it's much of a muchness. Like, I'll also probably spend, if I buy shoes, I'm happy to spend around $3,000. My last pair, I think, got it overseas. It was around $3,000. If it's a good shoe, I'll happily pay the cost because I know it's going to have longevity. So,
okay, let's hear from Ria, Michael, then Benji.
I'm definitely not someone who likes spending a lot of money on shoes. I buy what I like, and I don't really associate with brands per se. Like, I'm not gonna purely buy Nike or Adidas. I just buy what I like.
Cool. Mike?
I very much agree with that. I don't really have a specific brand that I look for. Whenever I get shoes, it's usually from one of the factory shops where you can find like the same pair of shoes for half the price. And irrespective of brand, if it's a shoe I like, it's a shoe I'll get. The only pair of shoes I've really put effort into thinking about was when I bought a pair of hiking boots, because I saw that there was greater practicality with actually looking into the brand, also than a pair of sneakers.
Cool. Benj?
Yeah, I mean, kind of the same with Mike, which is like I'll put effort into hiking shoes and climbing shoes, but I mean, sneakers, you wear them to go around. I mean, I like Vans because it's cheap and colorful. My last pair of Vans cost me 450 Rand, and they will last about 3 years. So, yeah.
Cool. So I'm going to move on to the next question. I'm thinking, how important is it for you for brands to take a stand on social issues, on culture, on fairness, on the environment? How important is that for you when you're considering purchasing a certain brand? It could be anything, not sneakers, anything. Alex, let's start with you.
I think it's more important for brands to actually do something sustainably good than to claim that they care and have a public stand. I mean, I think that's important. I personally, okay, so a perfect example, anything that's trendy, I don't go near, but I do buy from brands that produce, have sustainable practices. I think long term, the knock-on effect of that is 10 times more powerful and 10 times more important than a brand doing a beautiful social media campaign that makes rich people richer about, yeah, we care about this, we're standing up about that. That's good and that's important. But I don't think long term that moves the needle as much as actually addressing a lot of the issues you have in the clothing industry. That's my opinion. And I'd rather pay more for that brand that does that than a brand that has got a fantastic PR team.
Ronan, I'd love to know where people eat. What's their favorite takeout?
Uber Eats.
No, but Uber Eats from where? Is it KFC or Nando's?
It depends
or
what's
Steers
open
or...
at the time. Beggars can't be choosers. when you're buying food at 12 a.m., you've got to take whatever's available.
Ria, what about you?
I've been eating a lot of KFC recently.
That sounds like a confession. Branden?
Yeah, Branden.
Yeah, I must be honest, Anditio's is a lifesaver. There's nothing really open at 6, 7 a.m. when I'm leaving work on the weekends. So it often is Anditio's, but also McDonald's, Nando's, it's getting to be a problem. So anything pretty much.
Benji?
Mike? Mike first, then Benji.
For me, I don't eat non-kosher meat outside of the house, but if I'm going out, I really like Indian food, vegetarian Indian. So there's a place called Tava, which is like my go-to restaurant if I am to eat out.
Yeah, also I don't eat unkosher meat in general. So it's either fish or vegetarianism, kind of leaning more towards Indian food and Chinese food, and just exploring the different like vegetarian cultural cuisine traditions.
And Tubbs, where's yours?
I think lately I've been into a lot of protein. So lately it has been Nando's, your KFC, your steakhouses that I'm currently into.
Cool. So Ronan, should we talk about drugs?
Yeah, let's head into it. I think the first question is really, do you believe that drugs are only things that you have in clubs or can be used to solve mental health problems? Let's start with Benji.
I wouldn't say solve. I think that used in the right environment, certain drugs, psychedelics, can give you insight into yourself that stems from who you are, but that can never be a replacement for real psychological help and, science-based techniques.
Do you think they should be legalized?
I think they should be legalized for safety, to be honest.
Cool. Mark, what do you think?
I mean, I personally think that, as Benji said, the psychedelics have a massive space in addressing mental health. I do think it can go a bit further than just putting like a band-aid over it. I do have friends who I know, I've discussed with them, have accredited taking psychedelics, not in large proportion, but like, properly and efficiently, with dealing with the effects of the lockdown during COVID, where it actually really helped them introspect and kind of get to a level of feeling like comfortable with themselves. So I do think that psychedelics in particular have a massive space in order to help people get a more like decent grounding with themselves.
Ria, what do you think?
I think if used correctly and under the direction of a medical practitioner and used for a specific purpose, then I don't see any issues with using drugs for that purpose.
Branden, do you see different things?
Listen, I know they're very prominent in the clubs, in the club scene. I mean, for example, this morning when I was leaving the club, a gentleman was just speaking to me, and it's very obvious. I understand why people take them. It gives you some energy, or it just makes you have a better night. But ultimately, like, I don't think they should necessarily be legalized. I think certain drugs could be decriminalized, but more so like natural psychedelics like your mushrooms, psychedelics like your LSDs, I still don't think will be right for people to take just because of the lasting effects that it could cause on your person.
So what I find fascinating is probably 5 years ago, we couldn't have this conversation. I think it would have been no, or I'd only use it in a recreational basis. The fact that most of you nod your head when we spoke about decriminalization or legalization, or could be used in a therapeutic setting. Would any of you try it in a therapeutic setting?
Yeah, probably.
Benji's a yes. Branden's, I think, a yes.
Yeah, I'll be open to it.
Ria's a no. Gabi's a no. I think Tubbs is a yes. Alex?
I don't know enough about it, so I find it's a really tricky thing to comment on. I don't feel like I personally have the need to, so I'd have to say no based off that. But I think it's a very interesting field and it's a very novel field. So I don't really, without having the facts, I don't really feel I could, have an informed opinion really on it.
Okay, so if we had to move on from there and say, well, if half the room would take a plant-based medicine or a drug for mental health reasons, for those that won't, what would you do to alleviate your mental health? Or how important is your mental health, and what do you do to alleviate your symptoms? Let's start with Gabi.
I personally go to a therapist once a week, and I know many people are like, you shouldn't share that on a public platform, but I think that it's vital to share it on public platforms, because if I don't share it, every time, literally has happened, every single time I've shared it that I go to a therapist, I know someone has come up to me afterwards and been like, thank you for sharing that you suffer with anxiety, because actually I also suffer with anxiety. And I think that people need to take proper sustainable steps, because what makes me nervous about these taking drugs for therapeutic reasons to help with mental health is that it's not sustainable and there's no routine. So you're going to only take it, okay, I have a panic attack, let me take it now. And then tomorrow, when you come off the drug, you're going to feel very low, and then you're going to not know what to do, or it's going to be very erratic. And I think the most important thing with mental health is continuity. You have to make sure that whether it be going to a therapist or going to a walk or going to a psychiatrist or talking to a friend, your mental health, it cannot be erratic, it can't be recreational, it can't be just once off, I'm going to take it. There has to be a long-term plan with mental health, because your mental health is a long-term thing that's going to influence your life.
Ronen, just before we go on to recreational drugs, I just want to throw up our last poll of the evening, and that is to ask the people watching us, and it's completely anonymous, but we want to actually, the people watching us, we want to know, have you ever tried weed and dacha or magic mushrooms or MDMA or cocaine or LSD or heroin? Let us know. Ronen, I think recreational is an interesting topic for me, because I was in the Sandton Convention Center 2 weeks ago. We were running Jewish Achiever Awards, and the Cannabis Expo was happening on the ground floor, and the whole building smelt of weed. But looking at the people coming into the Cannabis Expo, I suddenly turned around and I thought, I'm not sure that legalizing this was so good after all, when you look at some of the people entering. So let's talk about recreational drug use. Is the unbanning of dacha a good thing or a bad thing? Or, people have always smoked it and will continue to smoke it.
So I think what you're seeing around the world is that it's being legalized for own use, so that you can have it at home or have it in your personal space. You could grow it, and there's very little harm that comes of it. Certainly for those that are predisposed to psychological issues, and they would know that, they shouldn't be using these kind of things. And so The one thing to look at, the difference between a recreational user versus a therapeutic user is think of it as like buying a ticket, an airplane ticket. And think of it being recreational is a one-way ticket and therapeutic is a two-way ticket. A one-way ticket is just an escape. It's just you want to escape your current state and really you're prepared to take the risk. And even if it's a terrible day the next day, you're prepared to take it. And you can include alcohol in that too. If you look at a therapeutic use, what you're looking there is actually to use these largely plant-based medicines to access material that you can't access on the therapy couch and work together with the therapist afterwards to piece it all together, to work on your pain, your trauma, your anxiety, and make space internally for joy, happiness, and etc. And so it's really an interesting way, and it's coming online within the next year or two in the US and right around the world, is the use of MDMA and the use of psilocybin or magic mushrooms to really absolve your trauma and your pain so that you can live a more meaningful, happy life.
So just to answer the results, I'm going to share the results of people who did respond that they've used drugs. 85% of the people who responded said they've used weed.
Looks like more people went to the Cannabis Expo than the Jewish Achievers.
Apparently so. 11% did magic mushrooms, 4% did MDMA, 4% did cocaine, 7% did LSD. No one admitted or told us they did heroin or ayahuasca, and 15% of people did other things. So can I just check off this generation, Generation Z, and it comes from a question in the Q&A. Does anyone on this panel smoke?
Smoke what?
Cigarettes.
It's a distinction.
No.
Cigarettes, vapes.
Yeah, now let's do vape. Does anyone vape? Okay, we got 1, 2, 3 vapors. We can't see Tubbs. So do you vape, Tubbs?
Not anymore.
No, but you're a previous vapor.
Yeah, I'm a previous vape. I'm recovering.
So, Ronen, as we bring this panel to an end, what I think we should ask everyone of our panelists what they've learned tonight about their generation, and we'd love everyone who's still watching us, whether you're on Zoom, YouTube, or Facebook, please just drop us a comment about what you found interesting in meeting Generation Z. Ronen, what surprised you tonight?
So I think it's what I'm always surprised about, and tonight was even more, it's just how tolerance is just so pervasive in the room. There's so much understanding and tolerance and acceptance of someone else's position, even if it's different to your own. And we've come from such a polarized world, and here we're sitting in a room of people, very different people with very different opinions, and there's a lot of ands as opposed to ors, and very tolerant, even if they hold a different position.
I must say, before we go around the panel, the one thing that surprised me is I thought everyone was much more conservative than I thought they would be.
The other thing where I was surprised is how many times they answered the question, to be honest.
Benji, what did you learn?
I learned that Gen Z is a bit older than I thought. But I appreciated seeing how active Gen Z really is. I think that in the school world, it's difficult to see the actualization of what seems to be, as Ronen and yourself have pointed out, consistent values and characteristics of our generation. To see it really playing out in the business world and the political world, it's quite remarkable, and it's admirable. So, yeah.
Alex?
I must say, I need to echo that. One of my controversial opinions is, I think another one of them, is that I've always sort of thought Gen Z is a little bit more they're very vocal, but not as fast to actually do something about it. And I leave this panel with a lot more, that there actually is a lot more being done than we maybe give ourselves credit for.
Tats?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with Alex. And I think what I took from this is just the general willingness, these type of conversations about 10 or 20 years ago would be taboo. We wouldn't be able to have them. But we are now sitting here today. We are all engaging on all these topics. Everybody is comfortable sharing their opinion and just how accommodating we are of each other. And, so that's what I'm currently really learning about this generation, that we are willing to hear each other out. We are willing to give each other a platform to speak, which for me continues just inspiring me and amazes me all the time.
Gabi?
For me, what was interesting, I always thought kind of that Generation Z was very opposed to like religion and spirituality. And it was really hopeful and nice to see that there's actually a lot of people that still value spirituality and religion in whatever way that means to them, that it's still an important value. I was quite shocked by that and happy.
Michael?
Yeah, one thing that I'd just like to add on was specifically with regards to when we were discussing about the future of the country. I really thought it was quite nice to hear everybody really, really sticking up for the country and really, really like having faith in the future of it. Coming from somebody who studied economics this year, I can tell you that like the general consensus among people in that sort of a field is a lot less positive than what I heard tonight. But me personally coming at economics from a point of wanting to find the intersection between economics and politics with regards to dragging Africa forward, it was really nice to hear just how much faith there still is in the future of the country, no matter how many problems there are, as at the moment.
Ria, your learnings?
I think I'm leaving this session very hopeful and excited for a future where I see peers and colleagues really keen to make a difference in this country and on this continent. And it feels good because sometimes it feels like, it's a one-person struggle and you're the only person who believes in a better South Africa. So to hear everyone feeling just as hopeful and excited for a better day, it feels really great.
So Branden, the last word is in fact yours.
Yeah, I'm going to be leaving this realizing that there's actually a lot more that we as a bunch of people have in common than I actually would have realized. And it's actually just, eye-opening to see that we don't all necessarily have different views. A lot of the things are actually all the same.
So Ronenez,
Can I give you
your book Breach is out. Let's not forget. Remind us where we can get a copy. Can I download it for Kindle?
Yes, you can get off Kindle. On Amazon, you can order it, but I looked today and actually on Takealot, it's the cheapest. It's scarce on shelf. There's not many copies on shelf, but definitely on exclusive books online or Takealot. And I just want to add to what Ria Betts said, is there's one concept that I cover in the book, and this might just want you to buy it, is that, I hope everyone's been inspired about this panel today, because I think you can pick up the energy, you can pick up really their values and beliefs and their opinions, and they walk their talk. But part of the book really stresses that if we let go of our own beliefs and we really sit in the shoes of the youth and we help nurture them and harness their potential and co-create a world that we both want to live in, then it brings on this idea that a Harvard professor, Jonathan Lear, speaks about is radical hope. And that's what I want to leave everyone with. And it's a future that we cannot see from here, but we can commit to shaping regardless. And let's do it together.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. It's been such a privilege to be able to do this. Don't forget, end of January, we've got South Africa's most famous sportsperson, golfer Gary Player, on a webinar. I don't know if he'll be able to compete with the great intellects that we've had on the panel this evening, but he's certainly going to have some amazing stories to tell and share with us. I think many people are going away. We're not sure when we'll do our next one, but as soon as people are back or before they leave, we'll see if we can fit in another Zoom webinar from the South African Jewish Report. So this was the 143rd webinar that we've run since lockdown began. I suppose lockdown is over, watched more than 2.5 million times in that time period. But it's been fantastic to bring you this evening. And I think, Ronen, we're going to take some of that radical hope and let's make sure that the people on this panel actually go and change the world and change South Africa for the good. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Yes.